count at approximately 140 locations in the city. We use some automated counters on some of our bridges. Actually, three of our 4 bridges that have pathways. And otherwise, we do one-day annual counts at about 140 locations. Many of the same locations year after year after year. And so it doesn't give us mode split, but it does give us an apples-to-apples comparison at the same locations. But we have other data as well. And this is, we haven't yet published the data from 2011, but I can tell you that that little red dot there is where the number is this year. We'll release our 2011 count report pretty soon.
Roger, on your smart trips, so you can assess how many kilometres a week being reduced from an area. Do you ever look at, how do you monitor those? We have a similar thing called personal journey planning here, which is the same thing. And we look at how many kilometres a week we've reduced by people taking active modes or walking or cycling or catching transit. And we're looking at, are there other ways as well, like productivity? If that person's taken that alternative trip, has it changed their productivity or has it changed the productivity of that area?
That would be great data to have. Is
that something that you've looked at all?
We haven't looked at, well, the, how people get around is something of great interest to us, obviously. And the region of which Portland is a part, the Portland Metropolitan Region, the regional government is right now conducting a personal transportation survey. And so we will get very good data from that. Those surveys aren't done often enough. That would really be the way to identify what changes are happening over time. The last time that was done was 1994. So the data points are few and far between. The census commute to work data is probably the best data that we have. And actually, this next slide shows data from our census. So I've got some more updated slides, but these are the trend lines that we're seeing for the different modes of transportation. So we are seeing, in Portland, we are seeing the drive-alone trip drop as a relative to population. The percentage of trips being taken to work by car has been dropping over time. Transit trips are increasing ever so slightly, very little. It's the bike, really, that has been skyrocketing. And I've got some additional information about that. I think these series of slides show it the best, perhaps. So in 1990, this was our bikeway network. The darker the area of town is, the higher the bicycle commute trip to work is, the percentage of bike commute trips to work. So at this time, the U.S., the mode split in the U.S. was probably 1% for bikes or less. In Portland, it was 1% for bikes. So Portland in 1990, we had a few facilities, not much, very typical American city. 1% bicycle mode split. Most people drove. By 2000, we had a pretty more advanced network, and this was the bicycle mode split. Darker is better. By 2007, oh, sorry, that's my loaner phone for the area. And let's put that aside. It's like I thought, what is it? Auckland disco hours? What's going on here? Yes, anyhow, 2007, the network had grown a fair amount in that period, but really, in 2000 we had a pretty good network. 2007 we had a better network. But what had changed is that the bike use had grown quite a bit. So at this time in 2007, the citywide bicycle commute rate was 4.8%. It's grown another 25% since then at the citywide level. I don't have census tract data. But what that means is that in these dark areas here, that circle is about a 7K radius from the center of town, from the downtown. In those dark areas, 20% of Portland commuters live in those dark areas. And 13% of them get to work by bike. About 15% get to work by transit in that area, 20% of Portland commuters. Here, 30% of commuters live, bike about 11%, and 40% of Portland commuters live in these areas, and almost 10% bicycle commute mode split in those areas. So that's a pretty significant number that is It's that is that type of behavior, the visible presence of cyclists on the street, is what's really changing the culture in Portland. I talked about the safety a little bit. So as the bike traffic has gone up, here is represented by bridge traffic, our number of reported crashes has more or less held constant. It started going up a little bit in 2008, principally because we asked the police bureau to start collecting more data for us. So they changed their reporting procedures. They're now collecting more data on bike crashes that previously they would not collect. But overall, our index bike crashes are going down, and the trend, that's the trend in bike crashes in the index. That's where our index was in 1991. That's where it is in 2010, the last year for which we have good crash data. So, and you certainly experience this on the street. It just feels a lot different on the street, and the data supports that it is getting safer and safer in Portland to ride a bike. We're seeing more women riding. This is a good thing. 4 to 1 in 1992, 3 to 1 in 2000, 2 to 1 in 2008. Stayed about the same since then. We want it to be 1 to 1. Women don't ride when conditions feel uncomfortable. In the world's best cycling cities, they ride at equal rates to men, right? So when it feels very comfortable, women ride at pretty much the same rate as men. Perhaps also of interest here, Portland does not have an adult mandatory helmet law. It's mandatory for people younger than 16 to wear a helmet. And despite that, no mandatory helmet use has climbed quite a bit from the early 1990s to today. It's still at just about 80% today, still roughly 82%. So, these, again, typical scenes, families out enjoying bicycling, kids on bikes, just a lot of people using bikes. What is it that has made that happen? As I said before, Portland was very much an American city. We love our cars. We always have. We build seas, oceans of parking to support retail. We're very interested in planning for big projects. And then we go out and build them. And we destroyed some really great neighborhoods in Portland to build really big freeways. No different from many other places in the country. What really changed was political leadership that helped change state laws in the 1970s, and then in 1990s in Portland, local political leadership, local city councilors said, we are going to start building bikeways. And we started building bikeways. The magenta are off-street pathways. The green are the bike boulevards, which we also call neighborhood greenways. And then the blue are basic bike lanes. We started calling them separated in roadway facilities to capture the idea that it could not be just a standard bike lane. It could be a better bike lane, a wider bike lane, a buffered bike lane, or even a cycle track. So this is where we were when the bicycle mode split was 1% citywide. This is where we were when that city councilor came on board and said, let's really start building bikeways. And we just started building. And as we built, people rode in great numbers. And we're up to the point today where we have a 580 centerline kilometers of bikeways in the city, most of which are just standard bike lanes. We have currently funded for a total of 606 kilometers of bikeways, and we intend to go quite a bit further. Right? So people are just using bikes. Right? People are just, this guy's just carrying his weed whacker on a bike, and you just see all sorts of people on bikes. You don't see a lot of Lycra. So our approach to biking is very much formed by this idea. The strong and the fearless cyclist is the cyclist that will ride under any conditions. They don't need bike lanes. They ride in every city in the world. They're about 1% of the population. The enthused and the confident group is the group that has responded to the very humble 1.5 meter bike lane. That's the group. These groups together will ride very conventional bikeways. But we know that at a certain point, we knew that we needed to go further, which is why we started thinking about who's riding, how do we attract more people. And we came up with this categorization for this group called the interested but concerned. We know from our surveys that about a third of the population is just not going to ride a bike. No way, no how. We know about the strong and the fearless from census data. We could look out our windows and look at our local transportation data, as well as local census data, and identify that this enthused and confident group is perhaps somewhere around 10% of the population. So that left this great middle, the group we call the interested but concerned. And those are your Danes, those are your Dutch, those are your Germans, who they're just riding. They're getting on their bicycles the same way that we get into our automobiles. They don't really give it much of a thought. And it's not scary, it's very comfortable, and so this is the group, they need better bikeways. A 1.5 meter bike lane is just not going to do it for them. And so in Portland, this is the group that we're really thinking about. When we are designing bikeways today, they are our design vehicle. We don't always achieve the designs we want for that group, but that's what we're keeping in mind. Our change is still incremental, but we're getting better.
Just on that point, is that where the main focus of resources and staff are within the organisation now? Because I mean, the area of interested but concerned, that's your greenways.
That's our greenways, it's our cycle tracks, it's our buffer.
On your radial routes, that's where it's often harder to get in the facility, costs more. Where you're putting much more focus on the interested but concerned.
Yes. Yeah, so we're really, we're focusing a lot of our expansion of our network right now on the greenways, on the bike boulevards, because we don't run into the same political obstacles. They're expensive compared to a bike lane. They're about $250,000 per mile to build, sometimes more, sometimes less, mostly because of needed crossing treatments. But they are politically popular because they're popular with the people on the streets that we're building them, where we're building them. And they definitely appeal to this interested but concerned group. We are building cycle tracks, but they are more difficult because to build them we have to take away from the automobile. And but we're building them. And we're looking to improve really all of our bike lanes ultimately to get away from the 1.5 meter to get to something wider at least, and ideally some kind of physical separation. But yes, our effort, our focus on the neighborhood greenways is really designed to capture more of this interested but concerned group. And it's not just a transportation strategy, it's also a political strategy, because we want to build this constituency. The thing that has allowed us to get to where we are today has been all these people riding bikes on our bike lanes, which has given us a political constituency that gives support to our politicians. We want to continue that support. We want to build it, expand upon it. We're focused on these things. These are the Dutch bikeway design principles, both for bikeways and network. And a revelation to us was the distinction between safety and comfort. So everybody always talks about safety, but it's really comfort as well. People need to feel comfortable. So you can be safe riding a bikeway on a busy street, riding a bicycle on a busy street. Just take the lane, right? Just ride right in the middle of the travel lane. You're going to be safe. Motorists are not going to hit you, but you don't feel comfortable. And so we have really begun to focus much more on the idea of comfort as well as safety. People want to feel comfortable when they're riding. And so we have a lot of facilities like this around town. You'll see a lot of green around town. We have really focused our efforts on intersections. We noticed that some of the world's best cycling cities were really focusing on improving the safety of intersections, which makes sense because that's where most of the crashes occur. So we're doing signals, we're doing bike boxes at intersections, we're putting in median refuges, and then we're building our bikeways. We're building cycle tracks, we're building passing lanes to handle all the volume of traffic. We're putting in median refuges, both painted and civil. We're doing a lot of bike signals, but it's not just Portland that's doing it. So Portland has perhaps been the most successful at getting good results, but cities all across the US